Well, let the games begin. Earlier this afternoon, the opening ceremonies for the 2012 Olympic Games took place in London. And a few hours from now, they'll air right here in the U.S. For the next 2.5 weeks, the world's finest athletes will compete for gold, silver, and bronze medals in sports like cycling, swimming, gymnastics, and table tennis. As with any big event, before even starting, there has already been some scandal associated with the Games, with headlines like this. Olympic doping. World Anti-Doping Agency says 107 athletes have been banned from the Games. They failed the testing. These headlines have been all over the place. So as all of our loyal viewers know, one thing that we like to do here at RT is think outside the box. We want to ask a different question. What if doping at the Olympics were legal? There is a chorus of people calling for this very thing. Andy Mya, a bioethicist at the University of the West of Scotland, recently told Nature magazine, if the goal is to protect health, then medically supervised doping is likely to be a better route. Better yet, the world of sports should complement the World Anti-Doping Agency with a World Pro-Doping Agency, the goal of which is to invest in safer forms of enhancement. To talk more about the legalization proposal, I was joined earlier by David Epstein, senior writer for Sports Illustrated. David actually spent years covering sports and science and medicine and wrote some of the pieces that garnered worldwide attention. The news, for example, that A-Rod had to use steroids. I asked him his thoughts on this proposal. Here's his take.
There are a lot more barriers than just Olympic regulations. I mean, most of the things, or many of the things, that are on anti-doping lists in, for example, the United States, are against United States law in the way that they're being used. Like human growth hormone is very specifically allowed by the federal government only for 5 specific uses, none of which has anything to do with sports. So before even talking about legalizing this stuff in sports, I think you'd have to talk about legalizing it in the countries first, because the sports bodies can't circumvent national laws.
But some of the performance-enhancing drugs are legal within the United States and within some other countries, but they're not legal in, in the Olympic Games. Talk a little bit about that and about this notion that some people have that if it was regulated, that, we could see athletic potential skyrocket, that these athletes could, achieve things that we've never thought possible.
Well, first of all, most of them are not legal in the way that they're being used. They're legal with prescriptions that have nothing to do with sports. But as to that idea, I mean, if you view sports as akin to like the WWE, professional wrestling, where you just want to see behemoths sort of doing superhuman things, then fine. But I think a lot of people view sports as something different and special compared to that kind of theater, basically. I think that people don't feel like it should be a test of kind of pharmacology, particularly for younger athletes, when we know that drugs have side effects, some more serious than others. And I think for most people who are interested in sports and compete in sports, because I will say the most vehement, the people who are the most emphatically against proposals like that, in my experience, are athletes themselves. I don't think they want to have to do drugs to improve themselves. I don't think they see that as kind of in line with the things that they enjoy about sports they got into sports for. And I think it would change that aspect of the human achievement of sports.
There's also that argument that the doping is already happening, and more and more we're seeing increased, better technology to catch these athletes. I know that before the Olympic Games even started this time around, more than 100 potential athletes have been banned because of this. But the thing is that a lot of people in favor of this they say it's going on already. So let's have it go on in a place that is regulated, where doctors can oversee it to make sure fewer people are harmed.
It certainly is going on already. There's no doubt about that. And I think that's sort of, in my experience in talking with people in sports, I don't hear like any sort of growing movement to this effect. I know there are a couple of people who kind of have that idea, and I'm not, I think it has certain merits that should be discussed. But I don't think that the way that people usually attack a problem that is essentially a crime or a breaking of rules is to say, well, since it's happening anyway, like why bother enforcing it since some people are doing bad things? So I don't really understand that approach. It seems to me to be sort of, attack that people take when they're sort of afraid of having like an ethical discussion and attempting to stop something that's difficult to stop.
Absolutely. I call it the marijuana argument. It's going on. So that's why a lot of proponents of legalizing say, well, let's just legalize it so it can be taxed. We of course, just want to bring it up because we think it's a discussion that's really not being had. Let me ask you this. You know, when these athletes are found doping, they're afterwards, after the fact, they're often stripped of their medals along with their endorsement deals and their general glory. How much do you attribute the actions of these individuals to themselves, or is this more of a larger systemic issue?
It's both. It's both. I think that the athletes I've talked to, and I've talked to now dozens of athletes, usually retired, almost always retired, who have admitted to me using various substances that are illegal. And I would say they kind of fall into three categories: those who basically had no problem cheating whatsoever and were eager to look for the next thing. Those who would never cheat under any circumstances, and those who sort of could be pushed to the edge if they felt like all of their competitors were doing those things. And, you know, I think a lot of athletes fall into that category, and if they feel like they can be protected from their fellow competitors, they want to be, basically.
I'm wondering, since you covered this, how are performance-enhancing drugs different from, you know, other performance enhancers? I know the 2008 full-body swimsuits, or, you know, the sprinter from South Africa who is actually using mechanical prosthetics. I mean, these are also performance enhancers in their own right.
There's no doubt about it. And there's certain, you mentioned before, you know, there's some actual drugs and medical procedures that have been banned that then after a certain evaluation period that finds, look, we don't think there's any reasonable medical harm here. It's something that's available to a lot of people. It's not illegal in a lot of countries, that have then come off the banned list. And that does happen. Of course, swimming decided that those suits, I think as Ryan Lochte was just saying yesterday, that in that case the suit was making the swimmer instead of the swimmer making the suit, and they felt that was contrary to the goals of the sport, so they got rid of it. There's no doubt that the prosthetics, obviously a double amputee wearing prosthetics, those are performance enhancing, and that's been a source of great controversy. And actually, I was just finishing an article up on it today.
Oh, excellent. Well, we'll keep our eyes open for that. What about steroids? I mean, you've written about this. Steroids versus performance enhancers. What are the major differences here?
Well, steroids are performance enhancers. So when people say performance enhancing drugs, they usually mean banned performance enhancing drugs, right? Like there are plenty of drugs that are legal or legal with what's called a therapeutic use exemption. That means somebody has a medical reason to use it. So steroids fall under the category of performance-enhancing drugs, but that also includes things like drugs that cause your body to produce more red blood cells, stimulants like amphetamines. In sports where being, you know, like shooting, where shooters try to shoot between their heartbeats, they're beta blockers, which will slow, you know, lower your blood pressure, or performance enhancers. So really, when people say that, they're referring to anything that can be used outside the rules to gain an advantage. That ranges from steroids to amphetamines.
Now, so you've been covering this for a long time. Let me ask you a question. As a reporter, sometimes you have to trust your gut. And what we hear so often from these athletes who are caught for doping is they say, I didn't know, you know, my coach or my, you know, mentor or whoever was just giving me a formula and I had no idea. What's your gut? I mean, do you believe these athletes when they say this?
I think it's a mix. I think there's no doubt that some athletes, I mean, there have been some excuses that are just absolutely preposterous that have gone to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, you know, all kinds of crazy stuff, because there's always some sort of tiny minutia in the scientific world, you know, some 1 in 10 million case where somebody can argue maybe this happened. Sometimes I think those cases are real, particularly with regard to the dietary supplement industry. I've done a lot of writing about that industry, and there is no doubt that there are ingredients that are not listed, that are not supposed to be in things that you can buy at a place like GNC, that will cause an athlete to test positive. So I absolutely believe that some of those athletes have taken supplements not knowing that they had ingredients that would cause them to test positive, and then others use that as an excuse, seeing that it's something that sort of floats in the public.
Just last question for you, David. I know you're joining us right now from London. It looks like you're perhaps in your hotel room. What are you expecting for this Olympic Games? Are you expecting anything major in terms of more athletes getting caught for this? Yeah, what do you expect?
Well, there have been a lot of athletes caught in the run-up to the games, really. I think there's a high likelihood So there are two new things. For one, the biological passport program is being used in 6 sports, and that's a program that actually tracks blood parameters to see how they change over time instead of having to look for a substance. That's the first time that's ever been implemented, but since it takes kind of time to track the athlete, I'm not sure how effective that'll be this Olympics. But there's a new human growth hormone test. Human growth hormone is thought to be one of the most popular drugs of abuse in sports. And previously, the test only had a detection window of like hours to maybe a day. And the new test has a detection window of a week or maybe even longer. So I think we very well may see, the first ever Olympic positive test for human growth hormone.
Yeah, I've seen some stories about, reporters going into these these performance-enhancing, these drug labs, and they said this is going to be the cleanest Olympics ever because technology has just grown so much, and it's really important. And it's an important discussion we think to have, and want to thank you for being on the show. David Epstein, a senior writer for Sports Illustrated.